Good afternoon and welcome to this ARPAS-UK session on funding options with a zoom in on the R&D tax credit relief system. Today we have Annalise Scalieres, who is our ARPAS Finance Director, and Sam Turner from Leighton, who is our Business Development man. And they are going to be taking a closer look at all the options that are available to you. And obviously, if you have any questions along the way, please do pop the questions into the Q&A section and we will attempt to answer them all at the end. If we don't cover any, we will take a note of them and come back to you afterwards. And if there are, presentations will be available to members again afterwards as well. So thank you very much. And over to you, Annalise.
Thank you, Elena, and good afternoon, members. Let me share with you the presentations that we will be discussing today. Can you all confirm that you can see it? Elena, can you confirm? All good?
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
All right. So just as a way of background, nobody's perfect. I started my professional career a while ago in investment banking. And so I had the opportunity to go through a number of transactions, going through a number of investment decks. And in my second part of my professional life, I had the opportunity to bid for grants, in particular in the context of future flight. So hopefully, it will give me some ammunition for this conversation. So we'll start by looking at what I would call non-diluting funding options. And in particular, Sam will look into details into the R&D tax credit. And then we will look at what I would call diluting funding options. So the first option is actually your business, your revenues. And I find that sometimes people forget about it, that the number one sources of funding is clients. So it means that, for example, you could consider, if you're not doing it yet, seeking down payments from your customers, or maybe seeking milestone payments from your customers so that you get the money first before you have to incur any expenses. You may also want to consider synchronizing the cash outflows, for example, making sure that you do not pay your suppliers before you are paid yourself, so that through the life cycle of your project or your contract, you are in a cash positive or at least a cash neutral position. Another element is that you may not yet be in a position where you can generate revenues because you are developing your product or your service. But then one option that some companies are doing is developing some ancillary services or activities that help them go through that development phase. So why not selling consultancy services that will help you fund the development process? Now, the second source of funding that I'd like to cover are grants. And I'm sure that a number of you have been informed about the different programs that have been happening in the UK. And here today, I will really focus on the schemes that are available via BASE, because they are the key ones available to us as members. Now, first, the benefits and challenges of grants. So the benefit of grant is that once you are successful, you don't have to repay it. That's the beauty of it. What the government is asking you to do, if you are successful, is to use the proceeds to do what you said you would do, but they don't ask you to repay in any manner. The other benefit of grants is the sign of quality that it means for your business. If you've been selected in this competitive process and you've been successful, it tells something about your position in your industry. So it can be a useful sign for your stakeholders, your clients, your bankers, your suppliers, your employees. It's a powerful sign of quality. Now, the challenges with grants is that first, applying for grants takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. The other challenge is that it's very competitive, and so the success rate can be very low. And you may find sometimes that you spent a lot of energy for nothing if you haven't been successful. But I would say it's part of, it's a counterparty to being without any clawback in terms of repayment. The other challenges with grants, or something you must be aware of, is the cash flow of it, in the sense that for the BASE, or under the umbrella of BASE or ARPAS-UK later on, you claim in arrears. Generally, it's quarterly in arrears. And if there are no changes to your project or your file, then you would be paid for your claim, let's say, a month after the end of the quarter. But if you have some changes to your projects, or what is called a PCR, project change request, then that request must first be validated before your claim can be processed and the payment can be made. So it means that you do have to take into consideration that there is a time difference between the moment when you spend the money and the moment when you get your money through the grant process. Now, looking at BASE, you have on the link the access to the different schemes that are live, currently ongoing. There are 70 of them currently. I'd like to mention that out of the 70, 48 are regional. And actually, it's something you could be looking at, because it may be that those programs are less competitive than the national ones, and they can give you an angle to be more successful in your bids. Looking one step further down within the BASE programs, you will find among the 70 programs that one is Innovate UK. And the Innovate UK programs has been very much on the front page with the Future Flight Challenge later on, these late days. So out of the 20 programs of Innovate UK, I would like to make a specific point to the fact that they do relate to the industrial strategies grand challenge topics, that is the themes of innovation that the government wants to push and fund. So here on the slide, you see the four main topics that are at the forefront of the agenda currently. These are AI and data, aging society, clean growth, and future of mobility. And when bidding, you do want to meet at least one of those challenges, or if the program you identified is about another key challenge, that they do address properly those challenges, so that you have a higher chance of success in your bid. And if you do not bid, if you do not meet perfectly those challenges, then an idea is basically to seek partners, so that as a team you provide a compelling business story. You could, for example, team up with one of your clients, or you could team up with one of your techno partners or your local community. The point is to build a team so that together you have a perfect match with the scope, the eligibility, and the requirements of this particular program. So we mentioned a Future Flight. You won't find Future Flight on the portal anymore, because the competition has been closed, in the sense that the bids were submitted end of 2021, and the winners should be announced in the coming weeks, I guess. But it doesn't mean that there are not, or there will not be, additional opportunities for us in the ARPAS industry. So here you see one particular program that is highlighted. It's called Smart Grants. There is a Smart Grant program that opened just at the end of April, and the submission is for end of July. Now, I am not completely, fully, utterly aware of everything about Smart Grant, but what I can tell is that the focus is on game-changing technologies. And I could, from my perspective, drone is a game-changing technology, so that would work. But it also is about giving a return on investment for UK PLC in the coming years as opposed to in a decade. You see, they require achievable investment growth and market share after project completion. So you can have projects that are 6 to 18 months, single or collaborative, and then the total project cost can be between 100 and 500K, or you can have larger and longer projects, in which case they must be collaborative. You must set up a consortium. If we look at the funding level for those Innovate UK programs, I think they vary depending on the program, but what you see here for Smart Grant was also what was applicable for Future Flight. So I think it's a relatively good benchmark. So if you are an industrial research project and you are a micro or small organization, then it means that 70% of your total project cost would be funded. And I would add another comment to that. You have several types of project costs that are eligible for funding. The major category is actually labor. And it's important to note that the system adds a 20% overhead coverage on top of labor. So it means that in effect, your direct labor costs are funded at 70%, but you get a 20% overhead allocation, meaning 90% of your direct labor costs, in a sense, are funded. Now, as to be a small company, you must meet one of the two criteria that are set on the right-hand side. And I presume that a lot of ARPAS members would fit into that category. So you would be considered a micro or a small organization. It's also important to note a small element on the bottom left-hand side, that if you team up with a university, which is actually a smart idea, you have to remember that they are 100% funded, but they can represent only normally 30% of the total project cost, and 70% must be business funded and business activity. Now, if you're interested in bidding for grants, I would suggest that you start receiving some of the newsletters from those organizations. There are many other sources of grants, honestly. It's only a few portions of those organizations that are on this page, but those organizations would also indicate and highlight other sources of funding. For example, the Connected Places Catapult would highlight in their monthly newsletters some funding available via Europe or some other research and academia organizations. So it's a good starting point. A quick note on loans. Innovate UK provides grants. They also provide loans. I've never bid for loans, so I cannot go into too much details about it. I would say that the key benefit of loans versus a bank is that probably Innovate UK gives you access to loans where your traditional bank may not consider you as eligible because you are, you don't fit their criteria in terms of counterparty risk. Whereas IUK is here to fund innovation, and so you may have a higher chance of getting a loan via IUK than a traditional bank. Now, of course, it means that at some point you have to repay the loan. That's the nature of a loan, but it could be that it's available and it's less competitive and more frequent as a program than the grants program. Now, R&D tax credit. And in a few seconds, I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to Sam. I will just mention something about tax credit. Is that my reading is that the government is keen on pushing that program because they want to push the funding of innovation to promote UK PLC and job creation. But oddly enough, I don't know why, 80% of eligible companies are apparently not claiming. That's information I found on UK Business Angel Association. You can see the little logo on the left-hand side. So Sam maybe have some information about this. And if we are part of those 80%, then I suggest that we listen now to Sam and maybe get some quick return on our R&D by claiming. So I will now stop sharing, and Sam, leave the floor to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Annelies. Right, let me just quickly share my screen. Annelies, can you just give me a quick thumbs up if you can see that? Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So, yes, thank you for that introduction. As Annelies said, my name is Sam Turner. I'm one of the business development executives here at Leighton, and I'm here to sort of give you the overview of R&D tax credits, because Annelies hit a very poignant point. This is something the government want to push. In their recent budget, they had increased the value of innovation funding option they're going to allow into £29.8 billion. So this is something they want to push. This is something they want to grow. Now, I imagine that a lot of you will have calls, maybe from a smiley, maybe even slightly smug-looking chap like on the screen there, saying there's this out there, you can qualify for this, and it's hard to pull the wood from the trees. So that is what I want to outline today. I'll give you all the basic information, so then you will know whether to entertain those conversations or to look further into this option. So just as a brief agenda, we're going to go over the why, the who, the what, and the how. So why does R&D tax credits exist, and why should a company like yourself even be looking into this? After that, we'll go into the who. Who are Leighton? Who are we to tell you whether you should look into R&D tax credits or whether you qualify? And then we'll go into the sort of nitty-gritty of it, the what. What is it, and what does it do for your company? And then we'll go into the how. So you think you've got some qualified projects, you think there may be strands there. How do you go from A, of starting looking into it, all the way to B, of getting that cash return or reduction in corporation tax? I have outlined there that we put some time for questions, but I think what we're actually going to do is leave the questions until Annelies has finished her section, and we will round them all off over the end. But feel free to whack them into the Q&A now or into the chat function, and we can go through that. So, why does R&D tax credits actually exist? Well, the government want to incentivise home-brewed UK innovation. They don't want you setting it out across the border. They want it to be going here so they can see the benefit from it themselves. The way they incentivise this is by giving corporation tax breaks or cash injections to reinvest into your UK company. Now, the government, they don't do this out of the goodness of their heart. They are looking to cumulatively grow the UK economy for your company to be a percentage of that growth. So you can hire that extra staff member that you needed, tender more competitively with the larger companies that are out there. Ultimately, to grow your business, to be more profitable, to pay more corporation tax, to get into their pockets in the long run. But the way you get that is through those benefits. Now, why should your company look into this? We've already mentioned it, to reinvest, to accelerate your growth. Do you want 10% growth, 20, 30% growth over the next 3 years? This is an option there to get that. Maybe your idea is just to consolidate. We've just come out of COVID, and it's the time to be most tax efficient, and this is another string to your bow in that arsenal. The third point is to recoup costs from difficult projects. There's a weird nuance to the R&D tax credits, where the threshold is already much lower than you typically expect to qualify, but often the projects that are best to look at are those difficult ones, the ones that overran, the ones where the clients were a little bit more difficult than you had expected. Often those are great in the narrative of R&D tax credits. So the government want to incentivize you to get a percentage of those nightmare challenges back. Also to forecast. R&D tax credits works retrospectively. We will go into that in more detail. But if you know that you're going to get 33 pence on the pound back for certain sorts of developments, maybe you did want to do some internal innovation over the coming years, but it has a considerable financial risk, you can forecast that you're going to get this percentage back through tax breaks. or just simply because it's there. So those are the options for why you could use it. Now, who are we to tell you? So they have partnered with ARPAS to help their members see what is out there and to figure out if they're qualifying. That is our entire raison d'etre. We want to help companies look into these more niche tax incentives, to break down the red tape or the government sort of jargon, to figure out whether you actually qualify, whether this is something you should be looked into. So then, you can accelerate your growth and achieve whatever business goals it is that you want to achieve. Within the UK, we're a fairly big outfit. We have about 300 employees, but the important aspect of that is that of those, 110 people are technical. They're people like yourselves that we take out of industry to write our reports for us. Two-pronged approach to that. One, so you aren't spending time answering simple questions from industry that should just be known. It puts the baseline higher. And then secondly, that will save you time and keep it compliant, making sure you're finding the right areas. So that's enough about us. We're a tax consultancy. It's not exactly the most sexy stuff in the world, but what is R&D tax credits and what does it do for you? So it's a government that was released in the early 2000s to reward companies for taking on these technically challenging projects. Now, it allows you to look back over 2 financial years and to claim back up to 33% of those qualifying costs. To be able to look into this, all you need to be is a UK limited company. It doesn't matter whether you're profit making or loss making. It just slightly changes the way in which you will receive your benefits. So also you can continue to claim this year on year on year. It's not just retrospective. You can do it for the years going forward as well. Of course, you have to incur the costs. How does that actually work? How do you go from actually getting this? Well, what HMRC actually want to see is a report, an academic style dissertation that outlines 2 main areas to look into. The first is going to be the physical projects, what it is that would qualify for R&D. The second part is going to be the costs. It's a proportion of your costs over a year that can be recouped back. So if we start with the project, this is the bulk of it. R&D tax credits is inherently driven by technical narrative. Now, I've seen it time and time again where companies have said, I'm not absolutely breaking the mold. It's not something brand new and novel to the industry. Now, if you are doing that, brilliant. This is absolutely something for you, but it doesn't have to be brand new. The threshold is often quite a bit lower than people would expect. Now, there's 3 areas of R&D that we can look into. The first is that brand new, novel, idea that's never been brought to market before. That is the first one, and that's quite easy to spot. As you can see on the diagram on the right, it's the periphery areas of these, and there's 2 of them, that tend to make up the bulk of UK claims. One of them is called appreciable enhancements. That's where you're taking something from industry that's already known, maybe it's a product that's already made, maybe it's a methodology that has been used before, and you're taking it and you're extending it. You're making it suitable for site-specific problems. You're tailoring it to your client's needs, or you're simply just improving its efficiency or functionality. That's one of the ways you can look, and it's a very common area we see. The third could be where you're trying to recreate something that is already at market. It could be something that is kept as a trade secret. It's already out there, your competitors do it, but there's no way that you're going to be able to call them up and ask them how they do it. So that process from 0 to 100 is your time, your financial risk, your man hours to get there. A good example of that would be something like Apple and Microsoft's facial recognition. It's the same tech, the end goal is exactly the same, but they aren't going to tell each other how they do it. So they have to go through their own development stage or their own testing periods in order to get to that. Now, you're looking back over your 2 years worth of projects and you're trying to find those strands of R&D, because not every project you take on is going to be R&D, and not every part of that project is going to be R&D. What you just need to do is pull the strands out of those projects to build the narrative. The best place to look for those strands is your most challenging project, those nightmare ones, the ones where you went home and had to tell the family about them, or where it kept you awake at night, often those are the best places to look for R&D projects. Or simply your largest projects, the ones that went on the longest or had the highest commercial value to yourself, they often come with that added technical uncertainty. Now, I've outlined a couple of examples here from our clients within similar spaces to yourselves that we've successfully made claims for. Now, whether that could be the way in which you're taking methods is innovative, you're capturing the data, you're interpreting it or cleaning the data in an interesting and new way, or you're developing methods in which to do that. Maybe you could be taking an off-the-shelf product and making it better, adding bits on, cutting bits off, whatever it is you need to do in order to make it suitable for the needs that you have. We've had clients who have taken a bit of kit and they put their own software on it in order to extend it. It could be site-specific constraints. Maybe you're working in a place that's got parts that are hard to get to, and you've had to come up with a new methodology in order to get in there. Listed buildings, oil and gas rigs, those sorts of weird and wonderful places. Or simply, you're experimenting as a company. You're trying out new equipment, you're trying out new methodologies to see which suits and which goes down the best. So that isn't an exhaustive list, by the way. Is a couple of, if you see strands in that, that's brilliant. But if you have projects that were just a little bit harder than usual, feel free to either pop them in the Q&A and we can go over them, or reach out to me after this. I have set aside time after this to sort of take any questions. So you've got your projects that you think may qualify. Then you want to figure out what this is worth for you. So there's a couple of cost categories you can look into. The first is going to be your salaries. The guys you have on the books, that's going to be your technical salary. Sadly, sort of administrative or financial staff typically wouldn't be included in the claim unless they've had a significant investment into the R&D process, but it's going to be those technical salaries that you want to look at. After that is your subcontractors. HMRC do want to reward you for when you go outside of the box to get extra staff, go outside of your own payroll to get that specialist help that you may need. So your subcontracting costs can be included as well. Up until 2023, if you've had to use the overseas development team for software, or if it was sort of subcontractors overseas, you're going to be able to include them. But as of April 2023, that will be removed. And then finally, a proportion of your software licenses. Sadly, this isn't your Microsoft Word, your Excel, things like that. It's industry-specific software, CAD/CAM systems, things like that. How are you actually going to get your benefit? As I mentioned, it's going to be a couple of ways. It's going to be a cash rebate or reduction of corporation tax. And once you submit it, it's going to be paid out in 28 days. It is a much faster injection of cash than within most sort of other ways of gathering funds, whether that's through capital, venture capital and things like that. And of course, under this scheme, you can look back 2 financial years. So as we speak, you are able to either revisit a claim if you've already done one of those years, if you want to make any amendments, or make 2 fresh claims, so you can get 2 years cash injection right now. So how's this actually going to affect your business? Because ultimately R&D tax credits is a byproduct of your work. I would highly doubt anyone has gone out in business to do an innovative or technically challenging project in order to receive back R&D tax credits. So you want it to limit your sort of day-to-day work as much as possible. This is the way that later doing, honestly, the way that we've optimized to get it done the best way. Firstly, you want to meet your advisors. This is an opportunity to ask them questions and to get all the extra due diligence done. It's also their chance to do their due diligence, dot the I's, cross the T's, make sure that everything's in line to get that successful claim going. Then you get into the meat and bones of it. You want a technical scoping call where you really should throw the kitchen sink at your provider. All the projects that sort of have hints of it, leave it to them to exclude the projects that maybe weren't worth looking into, because essentially you won't know until you sort of discuss it in the wider detail. Go through that. Make sure the precedent of actually writing that report is on the advisor. I've had clients I've brought on board from other people where, it's been them who are doing the legwork. They're writing up the report, they're writing reams and reams of paper in order to give that technical narrative. essentially that's what the company is there to do, make sure the precedent is on them for that. Let them go quiet and start writing away, and then you want to get into the finances parts of it. If you use QuickBooks, Sage, Xero, this is a quick and painless sort of role, really. Employee A, salary A, employee B, salary B. And then finally, you want to mark that paper together. Again, I've seen stories where people haven't seen their R&D report before it's gone into HMRC. Ultimately, it will have your name on it as well as the providers. You want to see it. Some of my clients have used our technical reports as venture capital pieces in order to raise funds. That's the standard of report you want to be seeing. And then finally, the submission. You can expect this to take about 6 weeks. So 10 weeks to get the actual cash in the bank. Now, just a couple of things to bear in mind. So when you've done this, you've sent the report off, and now you're waiting to actually get the cash back. Now, to make sure that happens, you need to be doing, you need to be using compliant processes, okay? The ways to do that is to make sure that your supplier has, technical consultants on their book who are going to understand the work and not sort of just take something as R&D on face value, actually to dig in and to find that nuance. Later, another way we do it is we're a member of the Research and Development Consultative Committee. So we liaise with the government in order to make sure that we're up to date on latest legislation and the changes and the ways they want to see their report. And always ask for the inquiry rate of any company that you're looking to work with. The industry average sits at roughly 10 to 15% of reports are checked. Latents currently sit at about 0.4%, so much lower than the industry average, and it's just a way of, again, moving that risk onto the supplier and keeping it away. And just another thing to bear in mind, any sort of good supplier will take full liability for their claims to make sure that if there's sort of any kickback in 6 years' time, if HMRC decides it's a load of rubbish, it falls on them, and make sure they insure the claims as well, just in case they drop off the face of the earth. Those are the things you could do in order to sort of get this process all done correctly. So how are you actually going to receive this benefit? So I mentioned you can claim this whether you're profit-making or loss-making. So if you're in a loss-making position, you'll get, it says a cash injection, no matter when it is you do it in the year. If you're in a profit-making position, you get the choice. You can either take it as cash or you can take it as corporation tax relief. You get slightly more if you take it as a reduction in your corporation tax bill, but it's sort of penny to the pound difference. So it's whatever suits your company best. And that is pretty much it. It is a bit of a whirlwind journey through R&D tax credits. So, I'm here to answer your questions. Please feel free to take down my number there and ask me any more sort of in-depth questions. I'll put them in the Q&A. But if you did want to do it personally, to not put it on the public forum, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much all for your time. Annalise, back to you to finish off the show.
Thank you, Sam. So, it's a very interesting, and I'm pretty sure that a number of our members could claim R&D tax credit, because now I understand it's not absolutely R&D. I mean, the technical staff on a project could qualify as an R&D support, claim support.
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right.
All right. So let me share again the presentation. I will go now through what I call the diluting equity, knowing that we will keep quite a bit of time at the end, if we can, if I don't speak too much, for Q&A on all the different topics that we will discuss. So equity. So I don't know if everybody is absolutely familiar with what I mean. What I mean by that is touching your capital, your shares. And so generally speaking, companies first explore all available options to them before considering opening the capital. So the benefits of opening your capital and raising cash with external investors is that, well, first you get cash, the cash that you don't get otherwise. So that's the number one advantage, of course. And the second benefit, and maybe sometimes people don't always think about it, it's the other signs of quality that it means. That is, if you manage to convince an investor to invest in your company, then surely it means that your company is worth something, that you are on a trajectory to success. And this is a positive element in your journey to convince clients, employees, bankers, authorities, etc. You know, it can be a strong argument in your favor as a sign of quality. The other benefit is that a number of those investors will open up their network. They will have some good advice to you. They, you know, if they are professional investors, then they know how it works. They've been with other companies before, so they know the tricks. They can be useful advisors to help you grow. Now, on the other end, once you open up your capital to external parties, then you have to accept that you are no longer deciding on your own. Governance is changing, and depending on how much dilution you have, you know, you may have more or less decisions to take with a different board members, or it could be that some of the investors would require their positive vote on certain key decisions. So you have to accept that you are no longer alone as founding members. You also have to keep in mind that investors must get an exit at some point. So it means that at the end of the day, after a few years' time, you must organize normally an exit for those investors so that they can realize their return on investment. And that can be a sale to a strategic advisor, that can be a sale to other financial investors, that can be an IPO if you're very successful. But at some point, you do need to allow them to materialize their profit. Now here you see a different set of potential investors. And actually these different categories have their place at different stages of your company's development. So this infographic is sourced by the World Bank, and I have to say it's a pretty good one. I'm not going to go through every step of a company development, but it gives a good idea of what's happening at the different stages and the evolution in terms of who the potential investors could be. And with it comes the amount of money you could receive, the level of dilution you would incur, and also maybe also the type of transaction that you would have. You don't have the same type of transaction, if you want, or documentation, if you are with friends and family or a business angel versus a institution like a large venture cap company. In a nutshell, you see that there is a red box on the left-hand side. I think the tipping point in the type of investors that you would get and the type of transaction that you would get is when you move from seed to early growth. And that is where you have sufficient traction in terms of product market fit. You have a product that fits a market. You can prove it because you have clients, they buy your product or service on a repeatable basis, and you have some traction overall that demonstrates that it's not a if your company is viable, it is viable, then the question is how fast can you grow it? And that's where you would need additional cash or additional resources in the sense of staff, so cash to pay resources to grow your business. And the risk level is changed because you have accumulated sufficient sign of quality to be a potential thriving company, and why not unicorn, and you've passed that bridge, and then you qualify, let's put it this way, with a different type of investors that invest probably larger amounts, but with companies that have a reduced risk profile versus the pre-seed and seed companies. Now, we could go on the equity fundraising journey. So I'm not going to do that because it's the first time we have that conversation with you guys on funding. I'll just have a couple of minutes on incubators and accelerators, because this is a form of institutional scheme that is also available, which could be available in your region. It's something you should definitely look at if you're interested in it. So incubators, accelerators are programs that last 3 to 12, depending, a few weeks, a few months, and their objective is really to take you to the next step by offering masterclasses on key topics to help you grow your company to scale, giving you access to experienced mentors, but also to potential investors like angels. They can offer workspace, they can offer offices, and incubators can also offer seed money. So I gave an order of magnitude. It's a ballpark. Some of them offer more, some of them offer less, but let's say 10 to 30K for 5 to 10% of your equity. Now, some famous, let's put it this way, accelerators. One is DASA, Defense and Security Accelerator. So if you have activities that can be dual and that could qualify, then it can be a very good source to look at. They offer grant programs as well as loans, and they have regular events. The next one is on June 7th, so it might be something interesting for you to look at if you think you can qualify. Another high-profile accelerator is the Accelerated, which is led by Boeing. You also have JKN and DASA involved. So it's a 12-week program. The last cohort number 3, was announced not that long ago. And among the 10 companies that were selected as part of that cohort, one actually is an ARPAS member. It's in red, it's Flare Bright. So if you're interested in understanding what's happening with Accelerated, we could actually ask Flare Bright if they would be open to have a quick chat with us to explain what's happening in such an accelerator. But for sure, you see that these programs, once you are selected, give you, how shall I say, it puts you on the radar screen in terms of companies that have been selected through a scrutinous competition process. And so beyond the money and the expertise, it's also a way of improving your brand if you want. Now, with no further ado, I suggest we go into questions. We've been from, we've been from optimizing your terms and conditions with your clients to grants, to R&D tax schemes, to equity funding. So it's very vast. I think we should definitely open the floor to questions on everything that we've discussed, but also on what you would like to discuss next. Some ideas here. Some of them could be the HMRC schemes that are popping up now to support businesses in light of the the difficult economic situation. Or on the other end of the spectrum, if you would like to know more about raising equity, we're open to all questions. So now what I propose is that I stop sharing my screen, and Elena, if you would maybe take us through the questions, that'd be brilliant.
Certainly, Annalise, no problem. So our first question comes from Mark, and his is artificial intelligence and data. Surely compared to, say, scaffolds and poles to inspect large buildings, drones offer this. Would that be good enough as a start point to apply for potential grants?
Yes. And so typically, for example, if you are thinking of addressing a particular vertical, it would be interesting to look at what I would call the digital transformation innovation programs specific to the end industry, like construction. There are plenty of, not plenty, there are a number of programs. And then the key, I would say, would be to team up with one of your clients. And so it's a nice way of building the story with a client on innovation. They would get their share of funding as well. If you do a scope, they do a scope, they get some funding for their scope of work. And so it's a smart way of doing it.
Thank you. And we've got two from Ivan. The first one, Sam didn't mention how much it costs to use latent services. Could you give us some indication of likely costs?
Yeah, of course, Ivan. Our cost does vary, and we have a number of sort of ways we do it. We either work on a percentage of the benefit that the company will get back, well, has got back, it's probably in the past tense is the better way of describing it, or we occasionally do fixed fees, but to be honest with you, that's not the sort of, it's not commonplace. You want to incentivize the provider to get as much back as possible, so often the percentages work. But the terrible bit about my business is that all of my consultancy is completely free. The only place where we sort of make any revenue is after your company has seen the benefits.
That's great. And again, the second one is again from Ivan. Linked to the question of costs for using latent services, is there a minimum value of project or claim that it's worth claiming R&D tax credit for?
No, so that's sort of depending on the individual, of the sort of returns they want to get. I have worked with FTSE 100 companies all the way down to sole traders, well, one-man band limited companies in order to this, but it's essentially up to your own ROI. If you wanted to do sort of 4 hours of comparative work for £1,000, that is something that we can do. But that's also, you're open to talk that narrative through, find out what it is, and then if it wasn't something you wanted to go forward with it, it's an absolutely no way a problem.
Mm-hmm. And then we have one in the chat, which is running a business and running R&D takes a lot of time and leaves no time for applying for grants. So sometimes it can be a long-winded process. Where is the best place to get help for applying for grants and funding?
So I concur, it takes time and energy. It doesn't happen overnight. I think the best thing is to actually do it in consortium, because you have an interest of larger groups and smaller groups to team up, and also academia. Long story short, I think the organizations that have been doing grant application for a long time are large organizations and academia, but they must team up with SMEs, even micro businesses, to have a higher chance of success, because that's what the government wants. So I think the best way is to identify maybe one of those large groups and do a consortium with them. And then you would have team who know how to answer question number 10, like what is the added value to society? They have boilerplate answers to this and they know how to do this. So I think, honestly, so if I take my little case, that's what I did. I set up the business case, the user case, the story is the business story. And then I reached out to universities and larger groups, and they thought, yeah, it's great. So on my end, it was on medical drone delivery, but yours on scaffolding, replacing scaffolding, it's a brilliant story as well. So you provide the business story and the user case, and so ideally it's a client, and then you go and see those groups and you make a team. Otherwise, I think that there are organizations like Leighton for R&D tax credits that do grants. We could dig out who they are. But I think the number one is to build a good story.
It's just something to bear in mind on this. It is actually something Leighton do. I know we were focused on R&D tax credits today, but again, yeah, we do have a grant writing service as well. So if there was any sort of questions around that, happy to put you in touch with the right people. There was one thing actually that did make me think of that I didn't mention in my presentation. If any of you take Annalise's fantastic advice to look into grants and go through it yourself, I've seen lots of companies then exclude that project from their R&D tax credits claim. It's not necessarily the case. All it means is you can't claim under the more lucrative SME section for that project. It doesn't exclude it in its whole entirety. You still get your normal SME claim, but just that one specific grant funded project, you have to claim under the enterprise incentive. It's a slightly lower rate of return, but it does still allow you to get the best of both worlds. So there you go, just another bit of information that suddenly came to the top of my head.
That's extremely useful, Sam. Thank you. So we haven't got any other questions here at the moment, but we'll give you all a chance to come up with them. And then in the meantime, were there any other suggestions for, or preferences, requests for financially based webinars that you would like to see? So Annalise mentioned more on finding out about the HMRC business help. Is that something you would like to see? Alternatively, we'll send out some suggestions. Thank you, Ivan. We'll send out some suggestions as well to the membership as a whole and see what people come up with. We think this would be a really useful category to help support members with.
Something we mentioned yesterday, and I had to put it to the group. We do a lot of capital allowances, so R&D tax code is inherently based on your operational expenditure, but there is a flip side to that. The capital allowances that allows you to look at your capital expenditure, especially in sort of construction phase projects. If you've done any fit out, new construction phases or refurbishments, there are tax breaks available for that, which I'd be happy to talk on if your members would find that useful.
That would be a very useful one as well, to have you come and talk to us about that too. Well, in which case then, I make it 23 minutes past 1. Do we have any more questions? Last call for questions. None here at the moment. Then in which case, I think we will say thank you very much indeed to Annalise, and thank you to Sam as well. The presentations will be available along with the recording in due course, and we will make sure that all the links through to the various websites, etc., will be available too. Thank you very much indeed for your time, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Okay, then, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.